So a lot of you want me to react to Putin's speech, and I watched a good hour and 40 minutes of it, and holy crap, it was a big bag of underwhelming meh. I mean, he covered all the bases, the neo-Nazism, everything, and everyone is anti-Russian, that NATO was going to attack Russia, so he had to preemptively strike a non-NATO country. I don't know how that works. He even revised some history, which is par for the course, saying that the Austria-Hungarian Empire drove Ukraine to become anti-Russian. They didn't. Perhaps invading them twice in the last 8 years made them more anti-Russian. I don't know. But he kind of rounded it out with the sanctions aren't working and Russia's doing great. It's the same old, same old. I mean, the biggest thing that he talked about, and obviously the thing that a lot of people are thinking about, is the START treaty, where Putin said that he's going to suspend the START treaty. Now, what the START treaty is the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty between the U.S. and Russia, and it was signed in 2010 by Obama and then President Dmitry Medvedev. It's designed to limit the amount of strategic warheads both sides can deploy, and it gives each country the power to inspect each other's nuclear weapons. And this has been something we've been doing for years now, inspecting each other's nukes. It came into force in 2011 and wasn't supposed to be renegotiated until 2026. But Putin said he's suspending that. Now, what the treaty sets the limits on is the number of intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and heavy bombs to 700. So only 700 capable nuclear weapons systems. On those systems, they can have up to 1,550 warheads. Now, how does that work? I've talked to you guys before about what's called MIRVing, multiple independent reentry vehicle. So you have one missile that can have up to between 3 and 10 warheads. It sets the limit on the number of warheads that can be deployed to 1,550. The reason they do that is because if you can put 10 warheads on 700 missiles, then, I mean, that's 7,000 nukes, and that violates the treaty. And then it limits the number of platforms that can launch these things to include B-800, which includes submarine launchers, ICBMs, and then bombers. So what's interesting is that the Kremlin somewhat backtracked a bit. They came out after Putin's speech and clarified that Russia is still going to respect the weapons cap laid out by the START treaty. Putin's comments were only supposed to target the inspections because Russia and the United States inspect each other's nukes every year. And they're saying that because the U.S. seeks to defeat Russia and Ukraine, it makes no sense to have inspections between the two countries when they're currently unfriendly with each other. Russia did say that it will still let the U.S. know when ballistic missile launches are going to take place, which makes sense because you don't want to launch a ballistic missile, have the U.S. think it's an attack, and then shoot that missile down over your own country or retaliate with its own ballistic missile strike. So those communications are still going to continue to be there and maintained. So really what this means is no more inspections, and this suspension, not even just exiting, just the suspension of the treaty is quite a yawner of an event. It really is kind of a nothing burger. I doubt Russia has any plans on building more nukes. They said they aren't, but it's just very expensive to build nuclear weapons, and they already have plenty to deal with other countries that might be adversarial to them. Yes, the inspections were meant to keep our end of the bargain and Russia's as well. Those may stop, but like I said, the amount of time and the amount of resources it would take for each country to build up nuclear weapons, it just wouldn't be worth it before probably these talks re-engage in a couple of years. So interestingly, China expressed concern over the treaty being suspended, even though they are not involved in it, because it means the U.S. really faces no legal restrictions to innovate its nuclear arsenal to become more undetectable, more advanced, faster, more rapidly deployable, etc. I don't think the U.S. is going to do this, but Russia signaling an end to the START treaty means the U.S. could take the gloves off themselves and say, screw it, we have the most advanced weaponry in the world by a massive margin. We're just going to continue to iterate until our nuclear arsenal is so powerful that it's completely unmatched. Again, I don't think the U.S. is going to do that, but that's a concern China has, and they expressed that concern to Russia, which is probably why Russia came out and clarified Putin's comments. Now, for those of you worried about Russia giving other countries nukes, that's not a part of this treaty. That's the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And countries like Iran or Belarus, who Russia has signaled potentially giving nuclear weapons to, that hasn't happened yet. And because that treaty has been in place for many, many decades. And really, given Russia's proximity to countries that are currently unfriendly to it, it's in Russia's best interest that the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty stays in place. I mean, the last thing Russia wants is a nuclear-capable Japan or a nuclear-capable Poland right there near their borders. So them giving nukes to someone like Iran or Belarus would open up the gates for countries like Turkey or Poland or Finland or Japan to all get them, and that would be a bad situation, and even China itself would be quite upset in that situation. So with regard to the START treaty and Putin's overarching comments and ramblings of what have become somewhat of a deranged old man, that even the crowd, it was kind of interesting. Like Sergei Lavrov was like frowning, and I know Russians seem to frown a lot during these speeches, but he was almost exceptionally contemptuous of what Putin was saying, specifically with the START treaty. And you look in the crowd, and everyone clapped when they're supposed to clap and do the thing. It's all theater. But the other thing is, when Putin was making announcements and talking about things, the crowd was very somber. They were very not engaged, and the facial expressions ranged from indifference all the way up to contempt. It was quite interesting watching some of the faces when they panned over them, and they actually stopped doing it throughout the speech because it was painting kind of a bad picture for what Putin was saying. But that's my feelings on it. Again, I don't think it was quite underwhelming, especially given the media, not necessarily firestorm, but media bolstering that came from Biden going to Ukraine. I thought he would address some things like that, and it just turned into be very underwhelming. So there you go.